He needed a bride, she needed a breakthrough. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main characters. The rain tapped softly against the glass walls of Vale Tower as midnight wrapped around New York City. Inside the 37th floor boardroom, the lights burned cold and white, reflecting off steel and glass. Ethan Vale, 34, CEO of Vale Industries, stood at the head of the table, tie loosened, jaw tight, phone buzzing endlessly with messages he ignored. On the wall, the time glowed 11:47 p.m. Another crisis meeting over, another reminder that the board no longer trusted him. He had built the empire from the ground up after his father's death, but now the vultures were circling. They think I am unstable, he murmured, voice low. His assistant hesitated by the door. Sir, they just need assurance. They say investors prefer a settled image. Ethan's eyes lifted slowly. You mean married? She did not answer, only nodded. He gave a dry laugh, empty of humor. A wife for credibility. That is all it takes to keep my company alive? The assistant did not reply as she left him in silence. The city stretched beneath him, glittering and cold. He looked down at his reflection in the glass-perfect suit, tired eyes, loneliness hidden beneath precision. Somewhere in the city, someone was painting in a small basement studio, chasing dreams without knowing he would soon knock on her door. 2 days later, in that same city, Lila Tran wiped a streak of paint off her cheek with the back of her hand. Her studio smelled of turpentine and coffee gone cold. The landlord's note on the door read final notice. Her art supplies were stacked in boxes, her mother's medical bills on the table like ghosts that refused to leave. She sat in the fading light, sketching the city skyline one last time before she would have to move out. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. Miss Tran? The voice was low, formal. My name is Ethan Vale, I have a proposal for you. She almost hung up, thinking it was a scam. I am sorry, I do not have time for, it is not what you think, he interrupted calmly. I need a wife. You need a breakthrough. Maybe we can help each other. There was a long pause, only the hum of the city between them. You cannot be serious, she whispered. Completely serious, he said. You will be compensated fairly. 6 months. Appear with me at events. Help me convince the board that my personal life is stable. And what do I get? She asked quietly. Enough funding to open your own art studio, he said. The words froze her. How could he possibly know that? You did your research, she murmured. I do not offer deals I do not understand, he replied. You have 24 hours to decide. The line went dead, leaving her staring at the phone, heartbeat loud in the silence. Outside, the streetlight flickered across her unfinished canvases. A marriage proposal from a stranger, a billionaire no less, sounded insane. But what if it was her only chance? The next evening, she walked into Vale Tower for the first time. The marble lobby gleamed under gold light, and her worn boots echoed softly across the floor. The receptionist guided her to the top floor. When the elevator doors opened, Ethan was waiting tall, composed, eyes sharp enough to read her hesitation. He handed her a folder. A contract, he said simply. She took it, flipping through the page's terms, conditions, duration, payment. One line caught her eye, clause 3, no emotional involvement. No love, she said aloud. No mess, he confirmed. Their eyes met across the polished table, two people from different worlds measuring risk and ruin. Lila took a deep breath, her voice steady but trembling at the edges. All right, Mr. Vale. You have yourself a bride. The pen clicked softly as she signed, sealing a deal neither of them yet understood would change everything. The morning after the contract was signed, Lila woke to a new world that still felt unreal. She stood before the mirror of the guest suite in Vale Tower, her reflection caught between disbelief and fear. A stylist had arrived at dawn, followed by a publicist and a driver. They called her Mrs. Vale, as if it were already law. Her hands trembled as she buttoned the cream blouse they had chosen for her, one that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. Downstairs, Ethan was waiting by the car, composed as always, scrolling through his phone. The city light cut sharp against his suit, and for a second she understood why everyone feared and admired him. When she approached, he looked up. "You are punctual," he said simply. "I try," she replied, unsure how to act around a man who had just purchased 6 months of her life. The car glided through Manhattan traffic, silent except for the hum of the engine. Ethan's assistant sat across from them, running through their upcoming schedule: press dinners, charity events, board appearances. "The first event is in 2 weeks, the assistant said. "You will need media training, wardrobe fittings, and a backstory." Lila's brows knit. "A backstory?" "You two met at an art auction," Ethan said without missing a beat. "You were curating for a non-profit, and I donated anonymously. We reconnected months later." His tone was calm, as if he had already rehearsed it 100 times. "So we are rewriting history," she said. "We are managing perception," he corrected. The driver stopped at a marble-fronted building in Soho. Inside, a team of stylists and etiquette coaches waited. They taught her how to hold a champagne glass, where to place her hands in photographs, and how to smile without showing too much emotion. Her laughter slipped out once when she spilled sparkling water over an expensive catalog. "You can laugh," Ethan said quietly from the doorway, his voice softer than she had heard before. "It is allowed." She looked up, surprised. "I thought your world did not have room for mistakes." "It does not," he said. "But you make them look less frightening." That night, after the fittings and endless lessons, she returned to her small temporary room overlooking the skyline. The contract folder lay open on the desk, its pages glowing faintly under the lamp. She traced the ink where her signature curved beside his. What had she really agreed to? Across the city, Ethan stood in his office alone, staring at a framed photograph of his late father, the founder of Vale Industries. "You always said business and family do not mix," he murmured. "But maybe I need both to survive this." The next morning, the first test of their public life arrived faster than expected. A photo of Ethan and Lila leaving Vale Tower together had already made headlines: "Billionaire CEO's secret bride." Her phone buzzed nonstop with unknown numbers and questions she was not ready to answer. When she rushed to Ethan's office, he was already watching the news feed on a muted screen. "Do not panic," he said. "It will work in our favor." "Our favor?" she repeated, incredulous. "They are tearing me apart online." "Public curiosity fades," he said calmly. "What matters is control. You will accompany me tonight to a board dinner. Let them see what they want to see: a united front." Lila swallowed hard. "And if I say no?" "Then the contract ends," he replied, voice firm but not unkind. "And you lose your funding. But something tells me you will not quit." Hours later, she found herself in a gown the color of midnight, walking beside him into a dining hall filled with chandeliers and polished silver. The air shimmered with wealth and scrutiny. She felt every eye turn toward her, weighing, judging. When a journalist asked how they had met, Lila remembered the story he had crafted. But instead of repeating his polished lie, she smiled gently and said, "We met by accident. He offered a deal I could not refuse." A murmur ran through the room, but Ethan's eyes glimmered with something unexpected approval. For the first time since their arrangement began, he looked at her not as a contract, but as a person. The night after the board dinner, Lila could not sleep. The city outside glowed like 1,000 restless thoughts, each light a reminder of how far she had traveled from the world she knew. She turned over in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the evening in her mind, the way reporters whispered her name, the weight of Ethan's hand at the small of her back as they walked through the crowd, the strange moment when their eyes met and something unspoken passed between them. She told herself it was all part of the act. The next morning, a knock sounded at her door. It was Ethan's assistant, carrying a leather-bound planner. "Mr. Vale asked me to deliver this," she said. Inside was a detailed schedule of events for the next 3 months: charity galas, investor meetings, photo shoots, even a weekend retreat in the Hamptons. Lila blinked at the list. "This looks like a full-time job." The assistant gave a polite smile. "It is, Mrs. Vale." The title still felt foreign. Later that day, she joined Ethan for breakfast in the private dining room of Vale Tower. The table gleamed with silverware she was still learning to use. "You handled yourself well last night," Ethan said, reading from his tablet without looking up. "I improvised," she replied, sipping coffee. "Your version of our story was a little too perfect." He glanced at her, amused. "You prefer imperfection?" "I prefer honesty," she said. "Even if it is messy." For a moment he said nothing, then lowered his tablet. "Honesty does not work in my world, Lila. Perception does." "Then maybe your world needs a little change," she whispered. His gaze lingered on her, longer than it should have, before he turned away. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a strange rhythm. Mornings began with business meetings, evenings ended with public appearances where they smiled for cameras and pretended affection. But in the quiet moments between, the act blurred. He started asking about her art, and she began to see glimpses of the man behind the empire, the one who stayed late at the office, sketching designs for community housing projects that no one knew about. One afternoon, she found him in his study, staring at a series of architectural drafts. "You draw," she said, surprised. "Only when I cannot sleep," he admitted. "It is the one thing that feels real." She smiled. "Maybe we are not so different." Their eyes met across the desk, the silence thick with something that felt dangerously close to connection. But reality came crashing back when his phone buzzed. "Duty calls," he said quietly, walking out. That night, as she prepared for bed, she caught her reflection in the window and almost did not recognize herself. The girl who once painted in a dim studio now wore designer silk and lived among skyscrapers. Yet inside, she still felt like an outsider in borrowed light. The next morning brought their first argument. Ethan had arranged an interview with a major business magazine without telling her. When the reporter asked invasive questions about their relationship, Lila froze. Afterward, she confronted him in his office. "You should have warned me," she said sharply. "I am not a prop." He leaned back, his tone cool. "You are part of a deal, Lila. Do not confuse that with partnership." The words cut deeper than she expected. "Then maybe you should remember that I am a person, not an investment." She turned and walked out before he could answer. Hours later, he found her in the rooftop garden, sketchbook on her lap, eyes red but defiant. "You were right," he said quietly. "I crossed a line." She looked up, wary. "Why does it sound like you are apologizing?" "Because I am," he said. "And because I do not want this arrangement to destroy the only part of me that still believes in people." Something in his voice softened her anger. She closed her sketchbook slowly. "Maybe you are learning," she said. He gave a faint smile. "Maybe you are teaching." In that moment, beneath the soft hum of the city, something shifted. Not love, not yet, but a fragile understanding. For the first time, Lila thought that maybe this fake marriage was becoming something real. Weeks turned into months, and the lines between act and reality began to blur completely. Lila found herself looking forward to the moments when Ethan would stop by her art corner in the penthouse, sleeves rolled up, asking what she was working on. Sometimes he would linger just to listen, pretending to check his phone while secretly watching her paint. She had even caught him smiling once when she sang softly to herself, a song her mother used to hum while cooking. The transformation was not only hers now. Ethan had started showing up to charity events he once dismissed as distractions. He stayed longer at art showcases, genuinely engaging with young creators, listening instead of merely observing. One afternoon, as they prepared for another foundation dinner, the elevator doors opened to reveal Ethan standing in a black tuxedo, holding something small in his hand. "You forgot this," he said, extending a silver bracelet. Lila blinked in surprise. "You kept it?" He nodded. "It fell off the night of our first event. I meant to give it back," but his words trailed off, and he simply placed it in her palm. For the first time, she noticed that his hands were shaking slightly. That evening, at the dinner, something unexpected happened. The host asked if Ethan's wife would like to say a few words about the charity's mission. Lila froze for a moment, but Ethan gave a small nod of reassurance. She stepped forward, her voice trembling at first but growing steadier as she spoke. "When I was younger," she began, "I believed art was only for those who could afford beauty. But I learned that art can also be survival. It can remind people who have lost everything that they still exist." The audience fell silent, moved by her sincerity. When she returned to her seat, Ethan whispered, "You just won them all." She smiled softly. "I was not trying to win. I was trying to tell the truth." For a while, everything seemed lighter. But life in the spotlight was never kind for long. The next morning, a magazine headline appeared, "The Billionaire's Bride, a Contract of Convenience?" Someone had leaked the story. Lila stared at the screen, disbelief turning into panic. Beneath the headline was a blurry photo of the contract itself, her signature visible. She stormed into Ethan's office, eyes burning. "Tell me this is not true. Tell me this is not what it looks like." Ethan's expression darkened as he read the article. "Where did they get this?" "You tell me," she snapped. "It had to come from someone close to you. Your world, not mine." "Calm down," he said, but his tone carried command, not comfort. "We will handle it." "Handle it," she repeated. "My name is everywhere, Ethan. People are calling me a liar, a gold digger, a fraud. Do you understand what that feels like?" He rubbed his temples, voice low. "You knew the risks when you signed that paper." The words hit her like a slap. "Do not you dare reduce me to a signature," she said, her voice breaking. "I believed in what we were building, even if it started as a lie." She turned to leave, but he caught her wrist gently. "Lila, wait, no," she said, pulling free. "This time, you do not get to manage the perception. You just lost the person who made you look human." She walked out, the elevator doors closing between them, leaving him standing in the echo of everything unsaid. That night, Lila packed her things and left the tower. The city lights outside blurred into streaks of gold and silver as she rode away in a cab, her bracelet clutched tight in her hand. For the first time in months, she felt completely alone but also strangely free. Back in his office, Ethan watched the newsfeed spiral out of control. His phone rang nonstop, investors demanding answers. But all he could see was her empty chair at the dining table, her sketchbook still open to a half-finished drawing of a rooftop garden. He closed his eyes and realized that for all his wealth and strategy, he had finally lost the one thing he did not know how to replace. Days turned into a blur of headlines, phone calls, and silence. Ethan barely left his office, ignoring every demand from the board, every message from investors who wanted him to step down until he could repair the scandal. His empire had survived corporate wars, recessions, and betrayal, but this time it was personal. The photograph of Lila walking out of Vale Tower had become the image of the week. The world called her the runaway wife, and called him the man who bought love and lost it. In her small rented apartment across the river, Lila avoided the news entirely. She spent her days painting, trying to quiet the noise in her head. The colors came out darker now: gray, navy, deep red. Each brushstroke carried the weight of disappointment and love that never had a chance to bloom. Late one evening, her mother called from the hospital. "Sweetheart, I saw your face on television again," her mother said gently. Are you all right? Lila forced a smile she did not feel. I will be. I just need time. Her mother hesitated. He will come around. People who hurt you sometimes need to lose you to learn. Lila's hand trembled as she hung up. Somewhere inside, she still wanted to believe that was true. Across the city, Ethan sat in the boardroom, the air heavy with judgment. The chairman cleared his throat. Mr. Vale, your personal choices have become a liability. The shareholders have voted to suspend your authority until further notice. Ethan said nothing. His eyes stayed fixed on the table as he signed the resignation notice. As he walked out, the flash of cameras followed him, but for once, he did not care. That night, he drove aimlessly until the skyline disappeared behind him. He ended up at a community art center, the one Lila had once dreamed of opening.